Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stones.
Am I going to get sued?
You got legal on this?
Let's send you out on the right note. PFF sucks. Have a great day, everybody.
Wow.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, and it's a Friday, Sam. We pushed back a day.
Yep.
Because of special PFF festivities.
We did, absolutely. And here we are, ready to go on a Friday.
Live on a Friday. Today we're talking training camp battles because training camp has either just started. Sorry about that. I moved the chair.
Yeah, it was just, it was cluttering up the picture a bit, so I fixed it.
Good, smart. So, we're going training camp battles because this is the week. Teams are reporting, rookies are reporting, full teams are reporting. It's all happening. So we're going to talk a little training camp battles. And then our first chance together to recap Hard Knocks, New York Giants offseason edition, 3 episodes in. Already some fun stuff to discuss there. So do you want to kick it off with some Hard Knocks? We'll get into the training camp battles.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, what's your initial reaction? Just for people who don't know, Hard Knocks, the whole series, right, started, I think, in 2001 after the Ravens won the Super Bowl. The whole idea behind it was to get behind the scenes in training camp.
Yep.
And then they've expanded the idea in recent years. They've done in-season ones. Netflix is not Hard Knocks, but it's come out with receiver and quarterback. But this is the first time Hard Knocks off-season, and it's following the Giants this past off-season, going through their draft prep, their free agent prep, and all of the decisions that they've made. So 3 episodes in, what's your initial reaction?
Yeah, I think this was a really interesting kind of Hard Knocks development because the offseason is kind of the most interesting time of the year. Free agency, the draft, all that kind of stuff. Everyone, the excitement about that team building period of the football calendar is so intense. PFF does amazing numbers, amazing traffic those times of the years. And now you're kind of getting to see a glimpse behind it and maybe get the answer to some of the rumors that kind of swirl around free agency, get an idea of what teams are actually doing. And obviously, we know the results of what happened. We know the players the Giants drafted. We know the moves that they made in free agency already. But we're seeing a little bit behind the scenes of how we got to those decisions. And, some of it, it's always tough to know with Hard Knocks, like how much of this is staged for the cameras, like, hey, we need a scene where you talk about this so we could actually, so it makes sense, and how much of it is actually organic and, properly captured, just natural actions.
I don't mean to burst the reality TV bubble here, but I think there are definitely parts of this that the content isn't necessarily staged. But when they go into Joe Shane's office and he's having meetings and everything, some of it feels like maybe they had the real discussion and it was longer and more in depth. And then for TV purposes, it was like, hey, could you just redo that for 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Because some of it's like, you're telling me Saquon Barkley, who has 1,400 rushing yards and is asking for $9 million. It's like, make sure all the information's out there so people know the context. But I think you're getting the basic idea of what the feelings and emotions were.
And I think for the sake of the people in those rooms, the kindness would be to think that it is staged. Because if it isn't, the conversation is a lot more surface level than you would think it is. Like we were just trying to get through the 3rd episode before we went on. And there's a scene in there when they were talking about Brian Burns, and Dayball's like, how many sacks does he have relative to other people? You're like, please tell me that the conversation is not operating on that level.
I don't want to get into it too much here, Sam. But we saw, I think in one of the first episodes, they had to sign a defensive coordinator, right? So Wink Martindale out. They hire Shane Bowen, who was with the Tennessee Titans under Mike Vrabel. Daboll looks a little surface level when it comes to his analysis here. You and I are sitting here, PFF NFL podcast, 10 plus years, hammering home the need for some advanced analysis and thinking through things and understanding context. And Daboll's like, hey, look, Shane Bowen's got a top 10 rush defense the last few years. Look at where he ranks in yards. And then he's asking about Brian Burns' sack totals. Again, maybe it's made for TV, but
right.
That's what we saw.
But only in those kind of areas. Like then there's the bits of the draft at the combine, where he's putting the quarterbacks on the whiteboard, and that stuff is amazing. Like, Daboll looks phenomenal in that environment where he's talking through his quarterbacks, getting them to teach him plays, getting them to recall plays, like all that kind of stuff. Daboll sounds amazing, but then, we're debating whether or not we make the Brian Burns move based off how many sacks he's had in the last few years. Like, as I say, I think the kindness would be to interpret some of these scenes as staged for a broader audience, as opposed to, that's actually what this conversation is, how this conversation is operating. Because I kind of hope that every NFL front office is operating a little bit more in depth than that.
You mentioned the draft interviews. We got to see clips from Caleb Williams, right? He was in there. Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze. So we got to see part of the draft interviews with all of those players. I think they only have, 20 minutes there? 15, 20 minutes in those interviews?
15, yeah. And
you were making the point leading in, it's like, maybe some of the stuff scouts are bringing up is also really surface level. But I think it was under the context of it was a pre-combine meeting. The scouts know these guys inside and out. They've been following them for multiple years. They did campus visits, everything in the fall. And this is right when you're starting to present to the coaches and other front office members, hey, when we go into this 15-minute interview with the player, this is the answer we need to get, right? We need to understand how this guy handles adversity or learns on the board or whatever it might be, how he handles being the alpha receiver that doesn't get the ball, whatever those things are. And you're just trying to get that one answer, maybe get a little bit more information. Then you'll have your sleepovers, right? You have your 30 visits and everything. We can find out more information. So I thought those were interesting. Of course, the Drake May one went viral. He answered the question correctly. As they're saying in the chat, Drake May answered one question correctly. People act like he's now a Hall of Famer. Those are funny because to the average person, you hear that lingo, and they're like, "This is amazing! This is amazing! This guy knows what 2-jet 70, 562 X snap." I was listening with in-laws, and they were listening to this. They're like, "What are they talking about?" But it's like that's the language that they speak in,
right? But the other thing is like the answer is arbitrary. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. is being praised for not throwing his quarterback under the bus, right? They're like, yeah, it must have been frustrating getting terrible passes like this, right? And he's like, I would never blame the pass. It's I could have made a play, whatever. And everyone's like, well done. Well done. Sidestepped the pit, the landmine there, avoided the pitfall, gave the politically correct answer. Good work, sir. And then you're like, Malik Neighbors, like, how would you handle not getting the ball early in the game? He's like, I'd be pretty pissed. And, you're, from the outside, you might be like, that doesn't sound like the right answer. And then it's still, no, I love that. Love a guy who wants the ball. I need that edge.
Well, so what I understand, and again, like Brian Daboll's job and Joe Shane, the general manager, their job isn't really, it shouldn't be to like interpret those answers and say, this one's right, this one's wrong. But what teams have, and we've talked to some of the team psychologists, and there's third-party resources that they bring into these meetings that are hired to write down and then interpret those answers. So a lot of times what those answers are, it's not about right or wrong. Like, oh, this guy said the right answer. This dude's a dog, right? Or this guy loves ball because he answered it. It's more about it's a data-driven approach, right? They track all those answers and essentially come up with like a personality profile or growth profile or whatever it might be. I'm just, I'm generalizing here. So it's not as simple as, all right, ask him the question. If he says the right answer, he's our guy. It really is creating it. It's like doing PFF, right? Is this guy good as a pass rusher versus run defense versus coverage? It's kind of like a personality profile. Does this guy want to improve? Is he working hard? Is he maxed out? And you kind of get to some of that stuff through those answers. So I get it. It's not as simple as like black and white. Did this guy give the right answer for us?
Yeah. It is. Those are interesting, I think, where you just at least get some insight into what the conversations are.
What are your thoughts on the whole Saquon Barkley saga? Because there are points in this where you get legitimate front office takes on running backs. There's a point where they're like, we can't, this guy's 27. He's 27 years old. We can't invest in a 27-year-old running back. This dude's ancient. You start to get some of that. You start to hear them talking about numbers north of $8, $9, $10 million and how that's ridiculous for the running back market. But you also get an owner coming in there like, this is the most popular player on the team. We got to keep him. Got to keep Saquon. I can't sleep at night if we don't have Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, to me, like the owner element is the most interesting part about the whole Saquon Barkley dynamic. It effectively seems to have gone basically as it looked like it went, right? Which is, and this was not even this year, dating back to last year, like the Giants had a fairly firm number on where they wanted to be with Saquon Barkley, and if the number went higher than that, they probably weren't going to be in there, right? And they did, I think, the smart thing in terms of they said, look, go find the market, right? You go get your number, and then just tell us what it is, and we'll see if we can match, right? Do us that courtesy. If we can, we'll match that number, and if you really want to be a Giant, we can make that happen. If we can't, then we wish you well in the new place. But then it's got this like looming shadow of the owner who just keeps coming in with this incredibly sad look on his face, being like, I don't know what do we do if we lose Saquon Barkley? I don't know if I can handle that. And you're like, imagine being a GM working in this environment where you're like, a running back, don't, all the stuff about running backs, right? Don't give them the money. It's not worth that. Move on, yada, yada. There's other cheaper options that will give you, and it's the right move. And then over in the shadow of the doorway is the sad-looking owner, like, you better bring back Saquon Barkley. If he goes to our division rival, I'm going to be so upset.
So that was the one thing I did want to bring up in the, we have a GM Steve segment right here on the show where I answer your questions, right? And it's like, I've also at times said, Sam, like it's easy for us to sit in the seat, be the GM for 32 teams, say what we would do, critique things after the fact. That's easy. I've spoken to some GMs, and you kind of see it on the show here. It's not just sit by yourself, find the best players, put a value on them, put a draft, round on them, and then pick the best players. And now I kind of wish it was, because I do really believe teams would make better decisions. But the human element here, and there's a couple of them that stood out to me. You have the owner who says, I need Saquon, I need a popular player, and so you've got the owner. Think about how much Joe Schoen as the general manager has to not only receive input from his scouts, his assistant GM, his cap guy. He's receiving input on his way to a decision, but he's also appeasing some of those people as well. And you have to appease the coaches, right? So there's this like flow of information where the scouts are the evaluators. They're informing the general manager and the coaches about the players. And then the coaches are coming back, and you have to have a good relationship with the coaches. Hey, we think this is this guy's skill set. Oh yeah, well he won't fit in my scheme because of this, and this. Or I need this in my scheme, so go get him. And so that affects player value and the evaluation. So the general manager is really, he is the CEO above everything, and he has to make all of these pieces work. And I think that's where the challenge is. And you could hear it in Joe Schoen's voice when it's like, hey, we did all this work to evaluate the free agents. We've got plans A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way to Z. And if B doesn't work or A doesn't work, man, B, C, D, like all these other players are coming off the board. There's a timing issue. Even if we get the evaluations right, the market all of a sudden is higher than we anticipated. Now we got to pay more than we wanted to. There are so many moving parts, and it is a challenge for a general manager, especially in free agency, to come out of it with, exactly what you were hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, the free agency thing is interesting because, he made the point that there's so much of this that is not in their control, right? Like they can zero in on the correct target at the correct price, and if they spend too long trying to get that deal over the line, the backup deals disappear, and, you can't pivot, right? So you almost, the longer it goes on, the more you end up locking yourself into like a bad deal, because then if it goes on too long, options plan B, C, and D disappear. So you have to get plan A over the line now. And in order to get plan A over the line, you now need to overpay. So plan A becomes a worse deal. So I think this is a potential source of a lot of the criticism of teams overpaying or signing a bad deal, is that they left themselves no option. So I don't know what the solution to that is, or if it's just an inevitable consequence of this free market madness over a short period of time, that you almost need to set yourself like a minimum time, to get these things done, and we go in with an offer, we give ourselves, X amount of time to get it done, and then we move, right? And if it's not done, we move on. We don't sort of lock ourselves into this difficult situation by keeping. But the player's agent is under that guy's not motivated to do that, right? His best interest is to drag it out for as long as possible because he wants the bad deal because it's a good deal for him. So it's a tough spot. And then, you then have that added complication of the owner hanging over everything and that's not necessarily influencing good deals either.
A question from the chat: was there anything that you took from the questions that Daboll asked the quarterbacks? And I think it was pretty generic. I think if you watched John Gruden's QB camp years ago, it was very similar to what you saw here, right? There's, hey, I've got this, here's the verbiage, and draw up your favorite play. Now erase it, draw it up again, and, my verbiage. Now I'm going to give you a play. So they want to test your recall, and they want to test how you learn, right?
Yeah.
There's an element of how you learn. So they're asking, how are you reading this out? Where are your eyes going? What are you thinking about? Because as the QB coach, it's not about just call the right plays. You have to teach. And so you need to know how the quarterbacks learn so that you can teach them properly. So I think the questions are pretty standard, right? How good's your recall, and how well or how are you learning? Can you learn? Can you add more to your plate so that you can run the system that I want you to run?
Yeah, I think it's just getting an idea of what they know and whether they'll retain information in a short period of time, which doesn't necessarily translate to how you apply that information and knowledge live on a football field, during the thing. But that's more the kind of, okay, where are we in the meeting room install, portion of this before we get onto the football field.
Last thing I wanted to highlight was I thought it was interesting when, again, Shane Bowen gets hired as defensive coordinator, and they have him present basically to the entire organization, to the scouts, to everyone. Here's my system, right? Here's what I call the positions. Here's what our system's predicated upon. Here's what we need. Here's how it runs properly. And that's, again, pretty standard stuff, but just seeing it in action that the coordinators have to inform the scouts and educate the scouts. When you're on the road looking at players, here's the type of player I'm looking for at each position. Here's their role, and you need that organizational alignment. So I thought that was interesting. Shane Bowen talking about, hey, I need 4 pass rushers, basically. I need guys getting after the quarterback. Interesting to me, I don't think he's had that with the Tennessee Titans, right? He's had that maybe in name with guys like Harold Landry and Bud Dupree and Danico Autry through the years, but they haven't had one of the, Jeffrey Simmons is very good, but they haven't had one of the fiercest 4-man rushes in the NFL over the last few years when Shane Bowen's been there. But with the Brian Burns addition, with Dexter Lawrence, with Kayvon Thibodeau, I think they have a chance to be one of the better, 4-man rush type of teams. The other interesting part, before they traded for Brian Burns at a hefty price, draft picks plus the contract, they were basically Joe Shane sitting him down saying, hey, you get Brian Burns or nothing.
Right.
And you can kind of see that in the roster building. We're going to talk later about training camp battles and the cornerback battles wide open. It looks terrible on paper for the Giants, in part because of this scene where Joe Shane's like, hey, if you get just Brian Burns this offseason, will that be enough? And they obviously decided that would be okay.
By the way, the best scenes in this entire thing, 3 episodes in or 2.5 episodes in, have been the entire Giants crew ragging Brian Daboll for not being able to run a 7 flat 40 time
That was funny.
at the combine. He seemed genuinely annoyed that they didn't think he could run a 7 flat. Fairly justifiably so, I guess, when you consider that Rich Eisen, a relatively old man in a suit, can run a 6-second flat 40. If you can't run 7, that's rough. But there was one point where after they said, hell no, you can't run a 7-second 40, he turns around after Xavier Worthy had run his. He's like, if I start at the 20 and he starts at the 0, can I beat him to the 40-yard line? They're like, hell no. And then he's like, where would I need to start? And they go the 35. He seemed genuinely upset by that.
Yeah, the 35-yard head start out of 40.
Yeah.
That'd be a good race. So yeah, I'm entertained by it. The training camp Hard Knocks, I feel like, has kind of run its course. Similar storylines and a lot of the same stuff. But the off-season one, I think this one has a chance to be unique every single season. If they keep doing this, every off-season is different, and this is unprecedented type of access. So I love this.
Yeah, I mean, the training camp one, the first few series are amazing. It's felt in recent years that it's gotten very sterile and sanitized and staged almost. Like you're not getting the same things you were getting in those first few series, and maybe that's just the inevitable way it's been going. But I think it's lost some of the interest. In addition to, it's been going for 20 years at this stage, so
been going for a while.
The novelty's gone. Right now, you have this first season of the off-season stuff, and that's just inherently more interesting.
All right, Sam, as a busy parent, you want to give your kids a head start in their financial future, but investing can often be both confusing and time-consuming. So Fabric by Gerber Life makes it easy for you to set up an investment account for your child that grows with them and helps prepare for their financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. UGMA stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kids can invest while they're minors, a UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolio is managed by Florida Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. So a little programming note again here. So I flew back in from Boston this week. Woke up today to whatever this tech disaster is. No idea if I'm going to be able to fly home tonight. Have a flight back tonight. I'll be out next week, so you'll be here with probably Trevor.
Yep, Trevor on Monday and Dalton on Thursday, I believe.
Great. So you guys hold it down for me next week. I'll be back again the following week at some point, and then we're into it. Like we're into, training camp will be full go. I'm going to try to stop by Patriots training camp next week, either Thursday and or Friday. Send some notes back.
Yeah.
Send some notes.
So if you're there, say hello to Big Goofy.
What?
If
you're telling other people.
Yeah, I'm talking to the people.
I thought you were telling me.
No. You are Big Goofy. You don't.
I will say hello to everyone else there. I'll say hi to all of our friends, Tom Curran and Phil Perry, Doug Kyde. I'll say hi to all of our friends.
Right.
And people can say hi to me at Patriots camp.
That's what I'm saying.
On Thursday, for sure. Don't call me Big Goofy if you see me, though. Do not. So, yeah, we'll be doing that next week. All right, training camp battles. Do you want to just start with the QBs here?
Yeah, let's go.
Because there's rookie quarterback battles, and then there's probably there's two veteran quarterback battles. But let's go through the quarterbacks. Start in Pittsburgh. Russell Wilson versus Justin Fields. Is this an actual training camp battle? Does Justin Fields actually have a chance to win this job?
Probably not, but I think it could be we've said a lot that the Russell Wilson within Arthur Smith's offense thing, I think has a very broad range of outcomes where it could be the perfect offense for him to sort of get back on track. And if it is, then it's not a competition at all. On the other hand, I think it could be a system that really doesn't suit Russell Wilson because of how much it wants to target the middle of the field. In an ideal world, Arthur Smith is aiming for different places with his passes than Russell Wilson has ever aimed, even when he was at his very peak, playing at his best. If that creates this kind of oil and water dynamic where it just does not work, then I think that becomes apparent very quickly. And at that point, if Justin Fields, on the other hand, actually does take to the offense reasonably well, because he doesn't have the same issues as Russell Wilson. I'm not saying he doesn't have issues, they're just different ones. Like if he actually takes to that offense well, and he's protected in the same way Ryan Tannehill was, and he can exploit the play action and use his athleticism, and if it's a bad fit for Russ and a good fit for Fields, I think that becomes apparent quickly, and it could become a competition fast.
I love that you bring up Ryan Tannehill, of course, him and Arthur Smith and that connection and everything. But I think when Fields came out, I did use a bit of a Ryan Tannehill comp for Justin Fields. And it was that continuum of quarterbacks that are good passers, take too many sacks, and somewhat mobile, right? Now, where was that off? Justin Fields is way more mobile, I think, than he even showed in college.
Like a super athlete as opposed to just, remember Ryan Tannehill played wide receiver back in the day.
But the quarterbacks that I mentioned were Aaron Rodgers. Like the very best of those was Aaron Rodgers. The next best of those was Russell Wilson, ironically, in his prime. And then you had Ryan Tannehill, right? These are guys that are going to take too many negative plays, but when they sit in the pocket and throw the ball, accuracy is excellent. They're good, productive quarterbacks. And I had Fields kind of like on that continuum. Now, he hasn't been much like those guys, but I'm still interested in this idea of, okay, year 4, sitting and developing, and then again, for whatever you want to say about Arthur Smith, he was kind of the guy involved in the Ryan Tannehill rejuvenation. I like to give that credit to A.J. Brown, maybe a little bit of Derrick Henry, maybe a little bit of the run-heavy system, but it is, I'm intrigued by Justin Fields in a developmental role here.
And remember, like, the perception of Arthur Smith's offense is, it's at a low ebb right now because it's coming off this Atlanta sort of dynamic where it's like, why aren't you using Bijan, Kyle Pitts? Why aren't you using these great players to the maximum of their ability? He is also, though, stepping into this. He's taken a step down. So he's no longer, we are going to get, 100% of Arthur Smith's attention dedicated to this offense, as opposed to you're a head coach, but also this is your offense running the system. Like, it's a different thing, right? A lot of times when these head coaches get a chance to step back into a coordinator role because things didn't go that well, you get this massive rejuvenation of their scheme, their side of the ball. Like, think of Dan Quinn, when similar dynamic, right? Dan Quinn's thing had run its course. He went back to Dallas. That defense was amazing. Like, that was the best version of Dan Quinn, and now he got another opportunity off the back of that. So, don't write off the idea that Arthur Smith's offense can still be an extremely good system for quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, you can't we say this a lot on the show, especially when coaches are hired. People ask us, how good is that coaching hire? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's a different job. It's a different job than just X's and O's. And maybe you do see the best of Arthur Smith here. The Steelers, look, all 32 teams have awesome, intriguing storylines for the season, but the Steelers, who look like they should be the 4th best team in the AFC North, but if they do get good play out of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, the roster itself is comparable to those other teams in the AFC North, and they have Mike Tomlin, pulling it all together. So I think that. So who's going to win this training camp battle? We'll give at least a winner of the battle, or what it looks like coming out of there. Russ and Fields. You going with Russ here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Russell Wilson wins the battle on the basis that So let's put it this way: if it isn't a battle, obviously Wilson is the number one guy. If it becomes a battle, I think he loses. Like, the only way it becomes a battle is if Wilson is a bad fit for
Wilson's
that offense.
so bad.
Yeah, and Fields isn't. At which point, I think he probably wins that job before week 1.
I anticipate Russell Wilson winning the job.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much better he's going to be here versus Denver, but I think he'll get the job and hold on to it. The other veteran quarterback battle, before we get into some of the rookies, Gardner Minshew versus Aiden O'Connell with the Las Vegas Raiders. Remember, the Raiders this entire offseason, this is what they did. They bring in Minshew in free agency. O'Connell, 4th-round pick last year, had some intriguing starts, had an incredible preseason. Greg Rosenthal tweeted at me the other day and, said something along the lines of, love someone the way Steve loves Aiden O'Connell. And I don't love him that much. I was playing it up a little bit last year during the preseason, but I love the high-end play of Aiden O'Connell. That's intriguing. Who wins this battle, Gardner Minshew and O'Connell?
Yeah, I mean, Aiden O'Connell kind of is the newest version of Gardner Minshew. I mean, they're very similar quarterbacks. It's actually an intriguing duo to end up in a competition.
You've compared O'Connell to Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
Ryan Fitzpatrick.
And they're on the same spectrum, right? Like these sort of wildly inconsistent, volatile quarterbacks that have a little bit of the hipster to them, right? With Minshew, it's the jorts and the glasses. With Fitz, it was the beard. With Aiden O'Connell, it's the mustache. Like, they're all kind of on a continuum somewhere, right? O'Connell was interesting last year because we've said it before, like, his profile as a prospect was the good was amazing, the bad was horrific, and it's like, where are you going to land in that breakdown, which is of the Fitzpatricks, of the Minshews, of the Jameis Winstons, of the Eli Mannings of the world. Like, it's all the same, wildly volatile. The good is amazing, the bad is terrible, and it usually shakes out to average somewhere in the middle. But it's streaky. Like, those guys are all capable of going on runs where they look amazing. Fitzpatrick did it multiple times in his career. When Eli did it, he won Super Bowls at the end of the streaks. Jameis, you've been waiting for the streak to happen every single year.
This is the year.
Since he came into the NFL. but it's possible. Because with Aiden O'Connell, you saw it even his rookie year. You had like 3 or 4 games that were really, really good. You had 3 or 4 games where it's like, this guy can't be the starting quarterback of this team. And then you had a few in the middle. So I would like to see what he can do in year 2. I think Minshew is solid. O'Connell probably ends up the same, like solid as well. But I would at least like to get, because we've seen those flashes and he's younger, you want to see more evidence from him.
Remember Minshew last year had this plethora of turnover-worthy plays that we kept highlighting, and the Colts started winning games, and they almost made the playoffs. And look, I'm a Minshew fan as far as I would love to have him as my backup, and I think, take the grade or the production off the table for a minute. What he did last year, which was to take a team on the fringe of the playoffs. I think Minshew's capable of being that guy and playing pretty good football. I think we know that's what Minshew is, and the Raiders should be looking at this as still a rebuild because they didn't get, it's Tom Telesco taking over as general manager. It's Antonio Pierce taking over as head coach. It is another reset for the Raiders, and I think you should go with Aiden O'Connell and see if he could be the guy, and then if he's not, you draft somebody next season and, keep looking.
Like a lot of the times you can tell with some of these quarterbacks when they're brought in simply by the contract. Where is he, right? Is that a starting deal? Is that a backup deal? What is this? Simply just look at the contract and you know what the dynamic is of the two quarterbacks. Minshew, though, signed this deal that puts him like right in the middle. He signs a 2-year, $25 million contract that has a $6 million signing bonus, $15 million guaranteed. That's extremely strong backup money, but it's not really starter money. So it puts you right in the middle of, if he wins the job, we're fine with that money. If he doesn't win the job, we're fine with that as backup money because we know Minshew's good.
Yeah.
It really is like it's legitimate open competition with a cheap second-year quarterback competition contract.
And we assumed that the Raiders were in the mix for one of the quarterbacks. They were picking at 13, and 6 quarterbacks went in the top 12. Right? We assumed that they weren't, hey, maybe Gardner Minshew's our guy going forward, as you just mentioned. It's good backup money. So I think it's Aiden O'Connell. Now, his actual performance last year was uneven.
Yeah.
Not in the exact way that you described at Purdue. It wasn't all big-time throws and
right.
disaster decisions, but it was like they beat the Chiefs without him completing a pass after the first quarter, and then they lost to the Chiefs in a game where the dude was dropping dimes left and right just to keep up with Kansas City. So he had all these up and down types of games. They lost. They had the 3-0 game against the Minnesota Vikings. They had other games where he was really good. I'm interested to see if they could sneak some consistency out of O'Connell here. So I think Minshew might start the season here for the Raiders because coming out of training camp, he'll probably look like the better quarterback, I would say. But I would love to see the Raiders give O'Connell a shot and just see what they have with him.
Yeah, same. I think that's probably the way it works. Like, I would be surprised if Aiden O'Connell dramatically outplayed Minshew over the course of a training camp. He also doesn't, I don't think, like when we watched Minshew versus Anthony Richardson in Colts training camp, like there's an obvious and jarring difference between the two of them physically when they're just taking a rep, right? The way they move, the arm strength, the velocity they can put on the ball, it just looks wildly different. And it probably shouldn't, but that, I think, makes an impact when a coach or an evaluator is like determining which guy do you go for, right? You go for the freaky super athlete. You just do, unless given a reason not to. You're not getting that with Aiden O'Connell, right? You're not going to see this wild difference between, oh, wow, like they might be similar, but look at this dude's tools versus the other one. Like it's going to be I think a relatively similar looking battle that Minshew probably looks slightly better on a down-to-down basis, but you're playing against the youth and potential upside of Aiden O'Connell.
All right, let's touch on the 6 first-round rookie quarterbacks. I don't think that they're all in battles. I'll go through them quickly, and we'll stop where there might be a battle. Caleb Williams, number 1 overall to the Bears. He's the starter.
Yep.
Don't anticipate any competition there. Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall to the Washington Commanders. I anticipate Jaden Daniels to be the starter.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, Drake May with the Patriots, already number 2 on the depth chart. He started number 3 on the depth chart at the beginning of minicamp and everything, whether that means anything. But as of now, going into camp, I'll report back next week, Sam. Jacoby Brissett is running with the ones for the New England Patriots. So Jacoby Brissett versus Drake May as a training camp battle. Who ends up as the starter in week 1?
I mean, obviously, Drake May is starting even in the medium term. I guess that one I think depends on how May plays in not so much training camp, but probably preseason as well. Like if he looks like he's ready to go. But Gerard Mayo has kind of been pointedly saying all the way along, like, he's got a long way to go. We don't need to do this right away. Like, I think Mayo is willing to run with Brissett for a little bit if they need to. I feel like Drake May and J.J. McCarthy are in a similar boat. Like, each team is comfortable if he doesn't come in till week 4 or 5.
Yeah, so let's circle back to that really quick. So Michael Penix was the next quarterback off the board. He's not starting.
Right.
Kirk Cousins will. Let me jump to number 12 overall, Bo Nix. He's competing with Jarrett Stidham. I think Bo Nix is going to – Bo Nix is like the 4th most experienced quarterback in the NFL right now as far as starts go, isn't it? Somebody needs to add those up. Who's got the most overall starts in the
Total
NFL?
career starts.
Just college or NFL. So I think Bo Nix starts. So that leads to Drake May, who we discussed, and then J.J. McCarthy, who you just brought up. J.J. McCarthy going up against Sam Darnold. I'm always of the mind here. And by the way, those are the two – I don't know if they're the youngest, but they are the 2 youngest, right? Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. They're both 21. They're both. May's a redshirt sophomore. JJ was a true junior, or was he true junior? I believe. But they're both younger, so that kind of makes sense. Besides maybe Caleb Williams, that part makes sense.
Williams is 22.
Yeah, but he was 3 years in college. But I think I could see Brissett starting for New England. I could see Darnold starting for the Vikings as well.
Darnold, I think I'd be surprised if Darnold wasn't starting week 1. Brissett I think could go either way. That's more of a coin flip to me. But I think I'd be surprised if McCarthy started the first game.
My take on this has never really changed, and it is the rookie quarterback should start when he's ready. And so, head coach, general manager, offensive coordinator, QB coach, the think tank needs to get to a point where they don't say, well, it's got to be week 8, it's got to be next year, it has to be week 1. It needs to be whenever they're ready. And you have to put something in place that says it's full mastery of the playbook, however you measure that, it's however you measure it, set a standard. And if that happens in week 1, great. If it happens in week 8, great. Just remember back when Justin Fields wasn't starting and Andy Dalton was, and everybody was so mad. Justin Fields needs to start. It's like, well, if he's really not ready, you don't have to start him. You don't have to start him just because he was the first-round pick. The interesting dynamic here between Drake May in New England and J.J. McCarthy, if you said who went to the best and worst situation as quarterbacks, right. May is among the worst, and J.J. McCarthy is among the best. So from May's perspective, in New England, it kind of makes sense because you're like, we don't really know about his offensive line. I don't know about his pass catchers. With JJ, we're saying he's throwing to JJ, Justin Jefferson, presumably Jordan Addison at some point, TJ Hawkinson with a solid offensive line. There's more reason for May to sit because of the situation and giving him time maybe than McCarthy. Yeah, with an offensive-minded head coach, a proven offensive system. Right.
McCarthy's definitely got a very good situation there. I think ultimately the first check mark that you would need from your quarterback is, total command of the playbook. Do you know what we're doing? Do we need to take anything out to limit you in order to go into a game on Sunday? Or is the game plan the same for you as it would be for the veteran that's starting in your place? If that would be your first hurdle to clear. If they're there, I think my general approach would be put them out there, because I think there's probably a lot of value in those live game reps that you simply can't replicate in practice or anywhere else. Now, the Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love dynamic maybe complicates that. Maybe there is actually a way of learning from the bench over a period of time, not just over 6 weeks in their rookie seasons. Maybe, I don't know. I could be swayed that potentially. It's really difficult to get clean data, right? Because you never get the A/B analysis. You never see what would have happened if it went the other way. You only get the end results. But I think that would be my approach, right? Be comfortable with where he is mentally. Know you don't have to take anything out of the offense to get him on the field, and then let's see what happens. And then the only thing that would change that, in my opinion, is if you believe the situation is so bad it's potentially damaging to his long-term progress, i.e. putting him out there, given what's around him, is going to entrench bad habits, not good ones.
All right, so we've had this discussion with rookie quarterbacks before. Sometimes if they're not going to start week one, do you pick the right spot, right? So here's the Patriots schedule, and we can make a prediction if Drake May ever takes – do you believe Brissett's going to be the starter?
I think that's a coin flip, like a genuine coin flip. I wouldn't make the determination either way yet.
I'll predict Brissett as the starter for New England week one right here in Cincinnati. But here's their schedule. So if Drake May is going to take over, there's not a whole lot of easy games to potentially take over. Bengals week one, Seahawks week two. They're at the Jets in week three with that pass rush and defense. At the Niners in week four. Then they have the Dolphins, Texans, Jaguars, Jets again.
I don't think you
Titans.
necessarily want to get a guy, like, let's find the good game to start him against. My thing with that has always been, like, just don't throw him out there against what's obviously a murdering, like a death game, you know? Like, there's some games where it's like the most complicated nightmare defense in football. You're like, now's when we're going to start him. Like, come on, you couldn't have waited one more week and thrown him out against just a normal team.
If they don't, I'll say this, if May doesn't start in week one, the Patriots, that week three game against the Jets is a Thursday night football game. So you're not going to start him on a short week. If you don't see May in week one, it might be between weeks 3 and 4 because they have that mini bye coming off the Thursday night game. So it might be week 4. That's what I'll make my prediction. Week 4 against the Niners, throwing them up against a pretty good team there. How about the Vikings and Sam Darnold? What's your prediction as far as who the starter is?
I think Darnold starts right away.
Is that what you would do? My prediction for Darnold, he's Mr. Weeks 1 through 3.
Sure.
Undefeated in the first 3 weeks, his first 3 games of the season over the last couple of years, right? He's a stud. So week 4 for him as well, for J.J. McCarthy to take over.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the way this works, right? If you think if the quarterback doesn't start week 1, he usually takes 3 or 4 weeks and then he's in. Yeah, I mean, again, you can't know from the outside because it's about where they are in the playbook. Once they are at that point, throw them in there. I mean, I have no problem starting Darnold for a few weeks if you think McCarthy's going to take that time to get up to speed. If he's ready earlier, play him. I mean, if he's ready week 1, play him week 1.
All right, I'm going to predict week 4 for J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold is a 3-week acquired taste.
And then week 4 sends him to the bench.
Yeah, just before it falls apart, send him to the bench. Is that it? That's it for QBs, right? To discuss? I think that's all we had there. All right, couple other non-quarterback battles to discuss. How about Buffalo Bills wide receiver 1? Stephon Diggs out the door. Is there going to be a true number 1 in Buffalo? It's, Keon Coleman was there.
Well, that's the key question, right? It's like, okay, they have this strange depth chart and who's going to be the top guy, et cetera. I think, honestly, the bigger question becomes, like, does this offense actually even have that wide receiver 1 anymore, or are they going to operate in a completely different way? Is this going to be like Kansas City's offense where it runs through Travis Kelce, right? Are they going to run this thing through Dalton Kincaid at tight end? Is it going to focus on these slot weapons like Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir taking a step forward? Like, is this now going to be an inside-out type of offense work in the middle of the field? Or are they simply going to say, Keon Coleman, you're our top draft pick, you're a wide receiver, you're playing X, you are now our wide receiver 1, give us your best Stephon Diggs impression?
Of the top 6 wide receivers on the Bills depth chart, I would say 4 of them probably work best out of the slot.
Yeah.
That's Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel. You would suggest Keon Coleman.
Right.
Andy Isabella, if you have him in the top 6. The outside guys there, Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Mac Hollins. Now, other guys that are in the mix there, Chase Claypool, I don't know how you sort out wide receiver 4 through 10 at this point. Chase Claypool, KJ Hamler is in camp trying to revamp his career. But all the guys who are probably going to make the team.
Justin Shorter's
in there. He had some big plays, athletic outside receiver for Florida.
Mm-hmm.
But like Shakir, Samuel, and Coleman probably work best from the slot. But I'm assuming Shakir and Samuel.
Dalton Kincaid has effectively
and
been
then Kincaid,
a
right?
large slot as well.
And then he's a big slot. But that leaves Valdez-Scantling and probably putting Coleman outside to give him those reps. But I think you're right. I mean, I think they created a team that is difficult to tackle after the catch, difficult to cover inside out. I like the way you laid that out, death by 1,000 slot receivers here. So it might be a completely different looking offense. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who has the most receptions, who has the most yards, or who is even called wide receiver one, because it doesn't even look like they have one on the roster.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily need to. I mean, Kansas City have done it for periods with Travis Kelce. The 49ers, before they assembled this insane array of weaponry, had periods where George Kittle was their number one receiver. It's possible. Like if Kincaid takes a step forward and becomes an elite tight end, and I think he has the potential to be that type of player, the offense could run through Dalton Kincaid from a passing point of view. They're also probably going to scale back on the passing overall and be a little bit more run-heavy, run-focused than they were in the last couple of years. So between that shift in philosophy and a potential shift to more of a Kincaid run type of passing game, it is conceivable that they simply don't have a number one wide receiver anymore.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people are saying, do you need a number one wide receiver because of what Kansas City's done? I think they are. I'm not saying the Bills can't do it, but I think Kansas City is a false positive because of Mahomes, because of Andy Reid, and because what they countered with was a whole bunch of, what the Bills might be doing here is a whole bunch of slots and quicks and after-the-catch types to adjust to how defenses were playing them. I think you need to have an elite quarterback to pull that off. The Bills have that, so I think they will pull it off. But at the end of the day, if we're asking, hey, who is the wide receiver one for the Bills? I don't think we have one. I don't think we have a pure answer. I think who leads in receptions? I'm going to say Dalton Kincaid. I think Kincaid's going over 100 catches this year. And I think he's the guy at the end of the season we say might have the most targets, the most receptions, but I don't think there's a true wide receiver one here. So are you in agreement there that we won't necessarily answer this question?
I mean, I think there's a chance that they try and make Keon Coleman into their wide receiver one. Even if that is the plan, I'm not sure it ends up with that as the outcome. Like they might end up being forced into the kind of dynamic we've been talking about of the slot-heavy, Kincaid-led system, because I just don't think that's suited for what Coleman brings to the table.
Either way, I'm intrigued by seeing Coleman. I mean, he's going to be one of our fun storylines to follow here because of how much you were pulling your hair out, Sam, during the draft season. What? Weren't you? Trying to figure out where to rank them? And
I don't have a lot of hair to pull out.
You pulled it. I'm just saying, this is what Keon Coleman did to you. Pulled it all out during draft season. How about the Kansas City Chiefs left tackle situation? Last couple of years, they stitched it together with one-year deals for veterans. They have not done that just yet. They have last year's third-round rookie, Wanya Morris, who played a little bit down the stretch, and then second-round rookie, Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU. It looks like it's those two guys head-to-head for the left tackle spot right now, unless they do bring in a veteran.
That's the thing. We need door number 3, the Donovan Smith, this year's Donovan Smith, which could still be Donovan Smith.
Could be.
I honestly, I think I would be surprised if Kansas City did go into the season with just that duo as the depth chart at left tackle, unless, Suamataia looks phenomenal. Like if he comes in and looks just dramatically better, I think, than people thought he was a prospect. Like that's entirely possible. He is dominant in training camp. Preseason looks great, and they just settle on him as the starter. He beats out Wanya Morris. I would be kind of surprised if they were comfortable with that as a duo going into the year.
I think they're going to give him a chance to battle it out. And again, this is one of those things. I don't know if it takes a week of training camp to say, hey, they're not ready. Wanya Morris had a 55.6 grade last year. I don't think he was a little unpolished coming out of Oklahoma. I thought part of the Chiefs' offensive issues coincided with Morris having to step in for Donovan Smith last year. And if you combine that with Jawan Taylor, his penalty issues and general inconsistent play last year, it wasn't really a great tackle situation for the Chiefs, especially when Morris was in there. But I think they're going to give him a chance to battle it out. And Suamataia was one of those, with Paul from Houston and, these second-round tackles that we were looking at that the Chiefs might try to pick up and plug in at left tackle. So I think they're going to let the young players battle it out. And then if it doesn't go well, call Donovan.
There are some solid left tackles, though, out there. The veterans, even beyond Donovan Smith. He took a big step back last season. Maybe they're not in love with him. Maybe they'd have brought him back already if they were. maybe he is their emergency guy. But I think there are other options that are clearly capable starting left tackles. And remember, since that Tampa Bay Super Bowl, this team has been hyper-focused on there will be no concern on the offensive line for Patrick Mahomes. Like, again, because of that baseline, I would be very surprised if they're like, no, we're okay with these two massive question marks battling it out.
All right, what's your prediction here? Wanye Morris, Kingsley Suamataia, or do you think it's going to be the
door number 3? I believe
option?
They sign a veteran.
All right, I'm going to predict they go with Wanye. I think he. I mean, I don't love him, but they trusted him last year for a period of time. And again, it wasn't great, but they trusted him last year. They drafted him fairly high as a developmental guy, and I think he wins the battle over the rookie, and they roll with it.
Before we get into the next one, we mentioned the last couple of shows we have a little fantasy league set up for this podcast. We had 2 conferences. There was the Big Goofy Conference and the Grumpy Conference.
Yeah.
We've got so many people add that there is now a 3rd conference called the Late Conference in honor of all the late PFF.
It's just late.
Yeah, well, that too. Anyway, you can get access to this if you go to the Discord, which you'll find in the description of the show. You'll find a link to it there. Jump in there. In the announcements thing, I think you can scroll up. You can find all the details for the fantasy league there. So dive in and get in the late conference.
Oh, I got it late for the dead.
For the dead, and for it's later than the Big Goofy and the Grumpy. It works on so many levels, Steve.
You get fined. There should be a fine system for being late to fantasy, though.
Yeah,
being late to it. Yeah.
Well, that could pay for the winner.
Pay for the winner. Yes. Yeah. Everybody throwing a buck. That was our kangaroo court system in the minor leagues. If you got called up and you were late to the season, you got fined. If you got called up to the team, like, hey,
but it could only be a buck because you guys didn't get paid.
Just throw everything a buck. Everything's a buck. Anything over $1 was like,
I'm out.
It was like
too rich for my blood.
It had to be something serious if it was over $1.
Yeah.
But you throw a buck in. All right, let's go back to the Vikings here. Their cornerback situation. We've got Mekhi Blackmon heading into year 2. We graded really well. I thought he played extremely well last year. I don't want to read exactly how you wrote this.
Okay. Well, we've got other options. Caleb Evans, Shaquille Griffin has been signed, Andrew Booth Jr.
Andrew Booth, maybe trying to salvage his career.
Yeah.
But it's really those top 4. They bring in Shaquille Griffin on a 1-year deal.
Tragically for them, no Kyrie Jackson anymore because of the accident. I mean, obviously he had a big potential spot for them this year.
He had a chance to compete there. I mean, to me, I think Mekhi Blackmon should have a chance to play. Caleb Evans has played, a little bit of football, and Andrew Booth heading into year 3 here, and really hasn't done much.
Booth has shown almost nothing so far in the NFL. Shaquille Griffin, I think, is a solid signing for them, and will presumably start at one spot. Mekhi Blackmon, I think, should be the clear other starter, but the way they treated him seems like a loaded term. The way they approached his playing time last year, it's like they never believed it, Like he kept – I agreed with you. I thought he was good. I thought he kept impressing, and based off his college tape, I think that's quite a lot of evidence in his favor, even though he's sort of undersized and maybe has some limitations in terms of strength and all those kinds of things. I thought he impressed, but they never seem to fully embrace that and just say, okay, this guy's good, let's plug him in as our starter. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I get the feeling that, they're not automatically just saying, all right, he's going to be our other starter, and now we've got 2 good guys, and we've got slot options as well. We're good to go.
I wonder if they are leaning into the size factor. Blackman's 5'11", he's 178, a little bit skinnier, but man, when he played, he was excellent when they played cover 2, when they played a softer zone. He came up, tackled extremely well, made plays on the ball in man coverage. I was very impressed with Blackmon, and again, you and I both liked him coming out of college, so I think it was like, hey, feeling pretty good about him playing well as a 3rd-round pick. But they did – not only did they sign Shaquille Griffin, 1 year, $4.5+ million, that cost him a future comp pick because of the move and everything. Like they wanted to get that extra depth in there, and between Shaquille Griffin, who's a little bit bigger and longer, and Caleb Evans being 6'2", 198, I do wonder if they're just leaning into size, physicality a little bit more, and if they just are hoping to play a little bit more press man coverage in year 2 under Brian Flores.
Yeah.
If that's the reason, right? So if that's the reason, Evans and Shaquille Griffin on paper fit that a little bit better, despite what we saw from Blackman, I think, being a really productive player in this system last year.
It'll be interesting to see if the changes they've made up front give Brian Flores the additional resources from a personnel standpoint to keep things going. He did wonders last season in terms of that scheme and keeping things creative and really making that defense play, I think, above its talent level. But it felt like it ran out of steam late in the season, and he just run out of tricks. And ultimately, at some point, the talent you have at your disposal is relevant.
And don't you think Flores, coming from the Belichick system, they want to play a lot of cover one, they want to blitz. They weren't able to do that last year. And given the offseason moves, bringing in Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, drafting Dallas Turner, they're expecting to be more of a four-man rush, let's play man coverage type of team, I would assume, this year.
Yeah, and because, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, these are guys that you are more comfortable dropping into coverage than the guys from last year, maybe. So it plays into that creativity again. I just wonder if it gives Brian Flores enough ammunition to reload that defense again and make it a big factor again, or if it's already kind of running out of steam schematically. And because on the one hand, if they've got a real boost from that group up front, that could actually help, the secondary could help guys like Shaquille Griffin or Mekhi Blackman be exposed less often. On the other hand, if the defense schematically has simply kind of run its course and it's been figured out a little bit, then those guys are going to be under pressure a lot still.
All right, so what do you think this looks like? Because they've got Byron Murphy Jr. playing in the slot.
Yeah. He stays. That's, I think,
he'll stay in the slot. The outside corners, PFF depth chart has Shaquille Griffin and Caleb Evans projected as the starters, and Mekhi Blackman is our data darling, right? Both from college and as a rookie. I would love to see Blackman play, but I'm kind of believing that they might go Shaquille Griffin and Caleb Evans here as the starters.
Yeah,
they'll come out of camp as the starters here.
Yeah, I think there's also the sort of dynamic of how exactly they deploy the safeties. Those guys play in the slot a lot. I think Byron Murphy effectively will be their sort of quote unquote starting slot guy. I think Griffin definitely is one starter. I feel like they'll go with the Caleb Evans over Mekhi Blackman just because they were doing that most of last year.
Yeah, and I'd rather see it go the other way.
Yeah.
I think Blackman plays man well enough. I think coming out of college, do you question his physicality a little bit? He's a little bit slight at the catch point, but
I think it is an issue.
It's the catch point, though.
Yeah,
he's there.
Right. You just have to weigh how big of an issue it is. Would you rather the guy that's in tight coverage and maybe occasionally gets out muscled at the catch point, or the guy that can handle himself physically at the catch point but just isn't there often enough?
I like Blackman.
Right.
He still makes a lot of plays on the ball as well. So I'll predict the same as you. It's a Caleb Evans and Shaquille Griffin starting, but I'd rather see Mekhi Blackman getting that time for the Vikings. Let's do one more cornerback battle, again, relevant to Hard Knocks here. The New York Giants. And I said this was relevant because they sat down defensive coordinator Shane Bowen and said, if we trade for Brian Burns, pay him a lot of money, give up a second-round pick and a future draft pick, that's pretty much all we can add on the defensive side of the ball. They went and did that. That leaves a cornerback room of last year's first-round pick Deonte Banks and some combination of, you've got rookie corner Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky, you've got Cordell Flott, young cornerback, you have Darnay Holmes, Nick McLeod, Trey Herndon, a couple of those guys playing more in the slot. David Long is in there, Trey Hawkins III. What does this cornerback room look like? It's Deonte Banks and friends. Right now, it would be Cordell Flott being probably projected as the starter opposite Banks. What does this training camp battle look like?
Yeah, with obviously a completely new defensive system. With a completely new scheme, a whole different dynamic, a whole different set of desires, goals, skill set that you want from a corner.
Roughly, the change is going to be going from Wink Martindale in his aggressive system. They're going to blitz from all angles. They're going to leave cornerbacks on an island way more than most teams. We're going from that to Shane Bowen's going to play a little bit more of the 2-4-6 that I like. Cover two, quarters, cover six, which is a combination of cover two and cover four, quarter, half, right? So that's a little bit more off coverage, some more zone type principles. You might not have to be that, true one-on-one man coverage corner as much in this system. In other words, I think you're going from a system where the pressure's a lot more on the cornerbacks than others to one where the pressure's not as much on the cornerbacks. So that's one way to just, think about this and say, hey, maybe on paper it doesn't look great, but it might, again, if the pass rush is good enough and they're getting home, that does protect these corners a little bit. So what do you think this battle ends up looking like?
I think obviously Deonte Banks wins one of the starting spots. I think retains, has that locked up. The investment in him is too strong. He's talented. He's got ability. There's no reason for him to lose that job. The other one, in terms of starting outside, I think Andrew Phillips has a shot at unseating the guys ahead of him and actually winning that job right off the bat.
I was going to highlight him. He went in the third round. He had a lot of fans. I think Dane Brugler really, really liked Andrew Phillips. I think when you watched Phillips' tape, there was definitely a lot to like, and there was a lot of plays where, man, he was just letting dudes get behind him. I'm trying to find my notes on him because there felt like some boom or bust to his game, but I think there was a lot. I don't remember if it was Nate Tice, but it was a few people that I really like, that I trust, that really liked Andrew Phillips' tape. But he was inconsistent, man. He'll lose track of the ball. Lose at the catch point, but he's also a guy that people didn't mind playing inside because he hits hard and plays well in off coverage. I think he does fit their system pretty well because Flott hasn't done a whole lot for the Giants at cornerback. I do think Andrew Phillips as a third-round pick does have a chance to win that battle.
Yeah, and he could conceivably be their slot corner as well. Nick McLeod is an interesting guy who played quite well for them in a limited role last season. He plays a ton of special teams as well, which sort of, doesn't necessarily secure him a roster spot, but certainly makes it a lot easier to get one. I wonder if he's in the mix to get playing time based off what happened in last year's defense. He actually, I think, was quite impressive. Plus, you've got that security of the special teams play there.
All right, so who gets the spot opposite Deonte Banks? We both mentioned Andrew Phillips. Do you think he ends up winning the battle as a rookie here?
So I think their three-man cornerback group ends up being Deonte Banks is one. I think Andrew Phillips is one of the top three corners. And then
Cordell Flott, by the way, almost 1,000 snaps over the last couple of years. He heads into year 3 of his career, 67 grade in year 1, 53 grade in year 2, right? He's just been okay.
Right. Yeah, maybe Flott is the third guy. So Banks, Flott, and Andrew Phillips is your trio.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I think Phillips finds a way to the field. He's just seems like the likable guy who has an opportunity to play early on here. So, yeah, I'll agree with that group. Banks, Flott, and rookie Andrew Phillips. Let's go to a couple receiver rooms, and then we'll wrap it up. New England Patriots. Again, I'll report back this week.
Yeah,
from training camp.
You'll have the answer.
Patriots are, we're talking about the Chiefs strategy and the Bills strategy of, maybe not get a number one. That strategy looks nice. It's doable when you have Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. It hasn't worked in New England the last couple of years because they, only had Mac Jones and an okay offensive line. So they're kind of rolling it back again with Jacoby Brissett and Drake May under center. But Patriots receivers, you have second-year Demario Douglas, who looked really good as a rookie working out of the slot, dynamic playmaker. Juju Smith-Schuster's battled a whole bunch of injuries, never really lived up to his previous ability in New England. Kendrick Bourne, coming off of injury, has been a pretty productive receiver. And then two rookies. You've got Jalen Polk in the second round and Javon Baker in the third round. Baker already turning some heads at minicamp, and I think there's a lot of people around the team expecting him to make an impact on the outside for the Patriots.
Yeah, there is. I think Demario Douglas, every time that guy was playing, he looked like their best wide receiver, even though, he didn't have a massive role or he wasn't, it's not like he's an elite number one guy. I think he probably ends up being the quote-unquote starting slot receiver for them. And then the outside, I honestly think it's entirely conceivable that both those rookies are the two outside guys, Polk and Javon Baker. Polk also played a ton in the slot in college as well, so he can move around. I think that group generally would be quite versatile and quite almost positionless. I think they can all move around the formation a bit. And Douglas and Jalen Polk can interchange a little bit. But Like, honestly, that might be the trio, the two rookies and Douglas.
The other names to mention here, Tyquan Thornton heads into year 3 as a speedster who's had trouble just at the catch point and physicality. Similar, disappointing second-round pick here for New England so far. KJ Osborne, who's done some good stuff in the 3rd, 4th wide receiver role, but because of the youth, I don't see either of those guys unless Thornton really has a massive breakout and that speed starts to play on the field. I do think Javon Baker, Jalen Polk, the 2 rookies, get as many opportunities as possible with the veterans, Juju Smith-Schuster, Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah.
So I think it's those 4
right,
getting the majority of the reps with Demario Douglas. I agree. Dynamic slot receiver as a 6th-round pick is going to get a lot of touches as well.
Yeah, Bourne is a useful receiver. I don't know if he's useful enough that it would keep either of those 2 guys out of the lineup, unless they show reason not to. Like if Baker's kind of hype has been more flash than substance. But if he's for real, if Polk is as good as he looked, it was a really strong wide receiver class. So even if he was taken in the 2nd round, doesn't mean he wasn't an incredibly talented guy. Like if those 2 guys sort of show what people think they will, I don't think Kendrick Bourne's going to keep them on the sideline. Same with Juju Smith-Schuster based off what he's been post-injuries.
Not the way they've played. It feels like one of those where the veterans will get a chance, and if they're better than the rookies, they play. But yeah, the rookies will have every opportunity to surpass them. The only other question mark here, Brandon Aiyuk, essentially on the trading block, mostly been linked to either Pittsburgh or Washington. But New England, anytime a wide receiver 1 is, available, they haven't had one in years, so they're at least mentioned in the discussion.
Yeah, and only, theoretically on the trading block. He wants to be traded. They don't want to trade him. True. So that might not be on the trading
They're not
block.
really incentivized to trade him just yet.
No.
The Niners. They're ready to move on maybe after this year, but I think they can.
Right.
They're trying to squeeze another
There's very
year
little
out of
incentive for them to do it now, right? Unless he's going to really push the issue, right? Holdouts, become a malcontent, whatever it is. Like him simply saying, "I want to be traded." You're like, "Oh, good for you. We don't want to trade you. Like you're more valuable to us inside the organization than you are outside." The time has passed for us to, plan for that next year and go in a different direction. Like whatever they give up to get you is not worth enough for this year where we expect to be a Super Bowl contender.
Last thing I'll add here, every year, and one of the guys we're about to talk about in a minute here, Christian Watson, a couple years ago with the Packers, one of our listeners astutely predicted Christian Watson having a massive breakout like after week 9 or 10 of his rookie season. Those things do tend to happen. I think with New England, I think if you're a Patriots fan, you're kind of hoping that there's some sort of chemistry built with Drake May, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker at some point during the season. Could be halfway through the year, could be later in the second half of the year. So I'll predict that those rookies may not win the training camp battles necessarily against Juju Smith-Schuster and Kendrick Bourne, but at some point we see the transition to the 2 young receivers that probably coincides with Drake May taking over for the Patriots.
Yep, that makes sense.
And now the Packers. Is this really a training camp battle, or is it just this is the receiving core? Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Samori Toure, at least that top 4 especially, all within their first 3 years in the NFL, mostly second-year guys. What a good group.
Yeah.
But no absolute star. I don't know if there's going to be a training camp winner or loser here. Bo Melton's in the mix as well. But, yeah, just a good deep group with different skill sets to tap into for Jordan Love.
Yeah, I think the only real competition element of it is it's kind of between Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks. I think Romeo Doubs has shown enough that he's a solid number 2, and maybe the initial hype on him got a little bit out of control, but I think it had substance to it. Doubs is maybe not going to be a superstar, but the reason he shocked everybody right away and surprised people relative to his draft position is he's a good player. He's a good NFL player. Jaden Reed was a really encouraging slot guy, but Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks are the guys with the sort of big sort of number 1 X potential, and Watson is now coming into this year with this weird story of having uncovered like a dramatic disparity in muscle volume between his legs which were either because of or contributing to or both his hamstring issues, which have apparently been largely resolved. If Christian Watson is now a hamstring trouble-free as a weapon. That makes him very intriguing given his size, speed, big-time playmaking ability. Meanwhile, Dontavian Wicks just looks like a better overall player, albeit without the kind of the overwhelming physical skill set that Watson brings to the table. So that, I think, becomes the interesting training camp battle. Like, does the superior player of Dontavian Wicks beat out the superior athlete who now might be healthy?
Yeah, I don't mind Wicks maybe getting more of the reps overall, because Watson became the guy that I love, right? The Will Fuller type, the deep threat, and then the way they used him in the red zone. Remember, we were at camp last year, and they're just running him on deep crossers and saying, "Here, keep up with me,
right?
Cornerbacks, I'm going to outrun you." If they just lean into Watson's skill set as a speed receiver, they were using him on end arounds. He had all those touchdowns in part because he became an incredible big play threat and a red zone threat. Like, I'm okay with that as Christian Watson's role. Maybe that does help keep him healthy over time, and Wicks maybe is a little bit more of a complete receiver. I don't think you see that from Watson. He doesn't catch the ball as consistently. I don't think he's as clean of a route runner as he could be. Maybe he's tidied some of that up, but if Watson's just a guy that's going to catch 50 passes at like 17, 18 a pop, I'm okay with that in Christian Watson's role. And maybe Wicks is a little bit more high volume, and as you mentioned, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed working out of the slot, moving around. I mean, they've got some different skill sets to tap into there, and I think ultimately it's not a battle so much as tap into all their skill sets properly, and the Packers are feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, I mean, even if the sort of dynamic between how much opportunity Wicks versus Watson gets is I think a legitimate moving target right now. Like, having them along with Dobbs, Jaden Reed, Bo Melton, like it's a really deep and good wide receiver group. The other sort of competition here that we didn't mean to talk about, but Tucker Kraft versus Luke Musgrave, I think that should be a real competition based off their rookie seasons, where, Musgrave missed time. He was the higher draft pick, and Tucker Kraft at the start of the year didn't look very good at all. But by the end of it, given the opportunity that was there because of Musgrave's injuries, Kraft looked amazing. And, maybe that's not enough to unseat Musgrave as the sort of primary tight end target, but maybe they just become, again, doesn't really matter which guy is getting more opportunity. You've got both of them now. But I think he should have an opportunity to kind of split that workload now with Musgrave.
I mean, all these reasons are why the Packers are, a highly touted team going into this year. All of those receivers that we mentioned in their first 3 years in the NFL, the tight ends, same thing, first 2 years in the NFL, none of them are first-round picks. So this is, incredible job by the Packers from a scouting, volume drafting perspective to bring all these bodies in here, have it coincide with Jordan Love taking over, and whatever that turning point was last year, halfway through the season, right around Thanksgiving. Since that point, man, the Packers' offense looked really, really good. Jordan Love dropping dimes in there, and these receivers and their unique talents all coming together at the same time. So, that tight end group of Musgrave and Kraft is definitely another one to watch. I think Musgrave at the end of the day probably gets the nod still with his size and ball skills, body control. They were, again, when we were in camp last year, they were trying to feature him quite a bit, moving Musgrave around. They know they have a big-bodied mismatch creator in Musgrave, so I think he ends up being the guy. But Kraft did some nice stuff down the stretch.
It feels like it's a similar dynamic to the receivers where Musgrave is the superior athlete. I mean, he's the one that looks obviously more dynamic and more impressive. But Kraft may have been a better player by the end of last season. Now, I don't know if that's going to be true heading into this year because obviously Musgrave was dealing with the injuries, whereas I think it probably is true with Watson versus Wicks at wide receiver. But definitely, Musgrave is the one that catches the eye from an athleticism and movement standpoint.
All right, man, that's all we had, I think, for our training camp battles.
All righty.
A lot of quarterbacks, some receiver, cornerback discussion, a little O-line. If you got any others, leave them in the comments. Let us know. Let us know what we forgot, what we missed.
It's been a while since I let us know.
Yeah, hashtag let us know. Anyway, next week I'm going to Pat's camp. I'm going to take a little break, flying back to New England if they get the planes moving today.
Hopefully. It's pretty impressive that some guy can just push a software update and ground the world.
Now you know what it's like as a product manager, right?
This is why I
push
don't-
Ultimate, it's broken, and it's like, oh no.
I learned years ago.
Just reset it.
Through constant Windows updates, right? Never update right away. You know, give it a little bit of time, right?
Yeah.
Wait and see. Wait and see the landscape. Check that it's a working one, right? Then dive in once you know it's good. Everyone updated right away. Rookie mistake.
I still can't even log into my Delta app here. It's not great.
That's not massively encouraging.
All they told me is there could be a delay. Just keep an eye on it. Well, I can't. You won't let me in. Anyway, we appreciate everybody for tuning in here. You'll be back again Monday with more PFF NFL Podcast.